This is your degenerate power hour, your late night golden shower. Too ill to be sick, so thick you can't split. That carnival spin with the rictus grin. I'm Joel, he's BMO, and this is Vagrants and Vandals Radio. That pretty good.
Yeah.
That pretty good. I thought I was going to screw it up, but it didn't. All right, BMO, we finally got back to the podcast desk. What are your thoughts? How you feeling?
Long road home. That's how I feel.
Yeah, so for people who are, for people who are familiar or not familiar, if you're not familiar and you're first discovering the show, welcome, and you probably wouldn't have any questions for us. But for people who have listened before, like, what the hell? What'd you guys do for the last 2 years?
Rebrand.
two years ago, we came back. Long story, I guess. 2 years ago, we started two podcasts, actually. We had the Neon Monster, which was our toy podcast. Yeah. And then we had the one that was kind of unnamed.
I forgot the damn name. It was so long ago. That's ridiculous.
Oh, the toy one?
Yeah, Neon Monster.
Neon Monster, yeah. The other one, we just kind of generically call it After Dark for lack of any other name. And then we got together the one time after many delays, if you remember.
Yeah.
Because I remember I got COVID.
Yep.
And then something came up with, I think, April and the boys. And yeah, long story short, the way I was having to post things online, it was eating up memory like insane on my computer, which was already, my computer's like from 2010.
Yeah, it was riddled with problems. That's for sure.
It's quite riddled with problems, but it is nice to finally got some new equipment, to be back in the saddle, to do the gabbing, and to tell folks some stories. So I don't know, let's get into some things. So recently, it's if you guys got moms, they probably gossip. Our moms are sisters. That's how we're related. And boy, do they like to talk to each other.
Oh yeah, there's always something to hear from them.
I go to my mom's, it's like a week or so ago, and she was like, "Oh, I hear Brandon's lost a lot of weight." And he's
heard correct.
I was like, "Oh, I don't. He hasn't mentioned anything to me. So how much are you down, and how you doing it?"
Now I was getting up there, and I don't know what I peaked at, but I'm guessing 400 pounds, because I'm at 315 now. And I look at pictures from a year ago, and my face is double the size. I mean, it's scary. I was like, I seen a picture. I'm like, I thought it was edited. I thought April had done something to it. Like she stretched me out. I'm like, well, I look, my chest was like I look like a turkey sitting on my neck. Like that's what it was. It was not good. And I started working as an agent of the custodial arts, and I walk about 5 miles a day. I walk to school all day, back and forth.
Yeah, anytime you got a job that requires a lot of walking, I mean, that's you getting your steps in.
I thought I had fucking cancer. Like my weight was falling off so quick that I started getting concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was ridiculous. Like I bought a new belt, and then all of a sudden that belt didn't fit. Like a week later, I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. And
then it just kept falling off, and then I kind of plateaued a bit, and I cut out a lot of sugar after work.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would drink like I told one of the teachers, I was like, I'm losing weight. I don't even understand how. I ate an entire pack of Oreos last night after drinking a 12-pack. I don't get it. It makes no sense. And then after I hit that plateau, I cut out all the after-work sweets, and I started losing more. I'm trying to get down to 250, 230, which I haven't been since, like, I don't know, back when me and Jason lived in River Raisin.
Wow. That was some time ago.
That was a long time ago.
Good stories from that era, too. We'll have to get into some of those. Now, when you had mentioned this the other day about how much weight you'd lost, for most of your life, you've been on the heavier side.
I've been over 300 from high school on.
It's not true, though.
Except for that stint where I lost all that weight.
Yeah.
I lost 80-something odd pounds and went down to like 225.
That's what I was going to bring up.
And I was sexy.
Sexy. That era from like, what 04, 05? That was area?
Peak BMO. Puka shell necklace, piercings. I had a pierced tongue, pierced eyebrow, four in each ear.
The Metro days.
The Metro days. And what a time to be alive that was.
All right. So then let's clear this up. how did you lose the weight then? Because the rumors at the time was drugs.
Yeah, I don't know why that was
Okay.
the rumor. I was working at Guardian Glass, and I was smoking pot.
Sure,
and I didn't
yeah,
drink,
but
but
you're
I
not
never,
losing. No
I
one's
never
losing weight
did-
from smoking pot.
I never did any hard drugs really, and
Yeah. So what
a
changed?
lot
Something
of
had
it
to
was
have changed.
working. I was working like 50, 60 hours a week,
Okay.
running boxes, and I wasn't eating at all. I have a real bit problem with starving myself when I get depressed. And I'll go days without eating. I end up blacking out at work in the middle of a safety meeting. I started my vision went like bright neon red and then white, and then I was on the ground and that was me woken up.
Wait a second. Is that when you effectively lost your job there? Oh, it was.
No,
Okay. Okay.
They're like
That was like a high-low incident,
they asked.
right?
No, I'll get into that in a second. I woke up to them slapping me in my face, and I'm like, my vision, like when you're waking up from a dream and it's kind of like foggy and blurry. That's what it was like. Like almost like I was still in a dream. And they're like, "Are you on drugs?" And I'm like, "I took some aspirin." I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I fucking blacked out. They gave me a Snickers bar and an orange juice, and about half hour later, I was like, color returned. I was good.
Your sugar probably crashed.
I ended up having to leave there because I jumped down off a pallet rack. I was smoking a cigarette, and it was an old tobacco facility. And I jumped down. When I jumped, I slipped on grass. Did something to my leg.
Yeah.
I hobbled out of there. I came in early to get some overtime. Nobody was there, which was against the fucking rules, too. I'm there in a factory by myself. Like, what the fuck are you doing? That was grounds for termination in and of itself. But I tried getting out of there right as soon as I got to my vehicle. Here comes the plant manager. He's like, "Oh, where are you going?" I was like, "I'm leaving." He's like, "Are you hurt?" He's like, "They said you were hobbling." I was like, "Yeah, I quit." Goodbye.
Oh, so you just quit then
yeah,
and
because
there?
they were gonna send me for a drug test.
Okay.
Back when pot
yeah.
was illegal, you were
Yeah.
a criminal for smoking it.
Yeah, because I remember I didn't know that you straight up quit at the time, like on the spot. I remember
They fucked me out of my Thanksgiving turkey, all that bullshit, bro. I got fucked royally in that department.
I just remember because you and Jason were living together at the time,
Yeah.
right? I remember hearing you got hurt at work and then you refused to go take the drug test, so they fired you. I guess it's kind of a moot point,
right? I mean,
Okay.
I said I quit first.
Yeah,
so
I
fuck
didn't know
that.
it was right there
I
on the
said
spot.
no, thank you. I'm out.
Okay, that is interesting. You know, one other story from that era, and we may have talked about this before, that I've always wanted cleared up. Maybe I've just forgotten.
I'll see what I can do.
You'll recall HoloFest 05?
Was that the first one or the sequel?
If you did a previous one, it had to have been the sequel because you were gone. That you left that winter, which is a whole separate story.
Then it would have been HoloFest 2, Hangman's Revenge, if I recall. I had a lot of people from Guardian Glass there. There was a lot of people there. So it must have been the first year.
Well, I know it was 05.
So, yeah, that would have been the first year.
Anyways. Okay. I remember at the time you kept on and on with this line that Kevin Nash was going to be there. And for those of you who don't know Kevin Nash, former professional wrestler, founding member of the NWO, the New World Order, for whatever reason, Brandon went on and on at the time that Kevin Nash was gonna attend
marketing, bro. Marketing the party.
HoloFest in his damn apartment. Like what the hell is that about?
He wouldn't even fit in the fucking apartment for one. He was so goddamn tall. Someone I worked with at Guardian Glass claimed that was his cousin.
Okay.
And now he probably did have a cousin named Kevin Nash. Was it said Kevin Nash of the wrestling world? No, probably not. I didn't know this at the time, and honestly, I didn't give a fuck one way or the other because what's the worst that could happen? I say Kevin Nash is going to show up, and he actually does show up. Like, I mean, it was just one of those things.
Because the only reason that it had any sort of like intrigue was he is from this area.
Right.
Yeah.
He very well could have been related to that guy. I don't even think that guy came to the party.
Yeah, I don't remember a whole lot about that party because that was before I drank.
That might have been year 2. I'm trying to think.
I think it was because it was that winter when you split from the apartment,
right? Yeah,
and you fled to Owasso.
Oh yeah, that's when he ratted me out for talking on my cell phone, and I fucking came home and took everything down. I was like, "Fuck you, we're not doing it." He went to my mom and told her I was told her I was always talking on my phone and this and that. Like,
because you were on your mom's plan?
What a bitch move. He talks shit about me. What a bitch ass move. Goes to my mom behind my back, tells her I'm on the phone all the time, my fucking cell phone, Not to mention I had free nights and weekends is when I did all my texting and talking.
So you weren't on her plan?
I was on her plan, but I still paid for it.
Okay.
But so I go over to my mom's house and she's like, "Oh, hey, let me use your." It was typical my mom bullshit.
She gaslit you.
Gaslit me. I need to use your cell phone for something. I'm not thinking. I'm like, whatever. Here, I go to leave. I'm like, got my cell phone back? She's like, no, I'm keeping it. Jason said you've been racking up the bill. I'm like, motherfucker.
And throws her source under the bus.
Right,
at the same time.
motherfucker. This kind of people I'm dealing with, dude. Fucking backstabbing sons of bitches. This is ridiculous.
Hey, man. I mean, not everybody.
Oh, so listen. I walk in the apartment and there's a severed head hanging from a rope. In the dining room area, you know, like that banister thing.
Yeah.
I fucking walk in, boom, fucking hit it. It flies off, hits a fucking poster on the wall. That falls. I just start tearing shit down. Then Jason comes home. Then what do you? I'm like, fuck you. I'm like, where the fuck's my phone at? I'm like, I'm not doing this fucking party. Fuck you. I'm done. And then I don't know if it was later that, it had to be a couple days, I had cooled down and eventually decided to put the party back on. But, yeah, he acts like I did him so dirty. Like, that motherfucker never did nothing. Like, his hands were clean. They weren't clean.
You know, I always question, like, see, when I was a kid, and before we go any further, I should have said as a disclaimer at the beginning of this: if you're planning to follow this podcast, don't listen with your children.
I've already told several people that,
or your wife,
like,
or
hey, I want you
whoever
to listen.
might, you know.
I want you to listen, but put headphones in.
Yeah. Don't broadcast it to the neighbors. Yeah. Okay. So growing up, I of course had 3 siblings. Amanda and I were the troublemakers. Okay.
Still are.
Yeah. And Jason and Sarah did. They always had this knack of, like, they would narc you out just for the sake of it. Like, there was some book it was being tallied in, like, ooh, a good deed for Jason today, good deed for Sarah. When I was a kid, I always thought, like, well, and I still do, like...
And it's not even like you guys were the younger siblings. I mean, you guys got a middle kid in between that, so...
Well, Jason's the oldest, then me, then Sarah, then Amanda. Right. No, they were always, you know, kind of parent pleasers. They were, I think, it was. I always look at, like,
that's bourbon.
Me and my, yeah.
Oh yeah, dude, it's the same kind of shit that they would do. Mm-hmm. Gonna rat you out to make myself look good.
But it's like, well, what do you gain other than that? Like, you gain. The other kids don't trust you.
The "it wasn't me" badge. It wasn't me.
See, that's the mistake of those kids, though, because they don't understand that those parents. They're just going to play you like you're the idiot pump that they're going to get knowledge out of.
You're Tekashi 6ix9ine now. Yeah. You're about to be spilling the beans on everything.
Like, it's yeah, I never understood. Like, I always felt out adults. Like, when I was a kid, if I was confronted with something, even when they tried that bullshit line, well, tell me the truth and you won't get in trouble. My brain was like, lie, motherfucker.
Not this guy.
Never trusted. I never trusted an adult. I always thought, no, they're still going to get me in trouble.
I cracked like that young kid in the Shawshank Redemption when he was talking to the warden. He shot me in the back of the head and threw me in a fucking ditch somewhere.
No, I was always kind of manipulative as a kid. Like, I always felt like adults were trying to manipulate me. Like,
they were though,
and of course they were. Of course they were. So, like, I just, like, for Jason to, I would love to hear his side of that story. Like, why did he even tell your mom this? Like, what was the catalyst?
Exactly. I have no, because that was like way before there was any issue between me and him because of rent and whatnot.
You're
not
right.
Having the money. There was no ill will. We were getting ready to plan a party together. And I was talking to a girl at that time. That's why I was so mad. Like, come on, bro. You're going to rob the one chance of me getting some pussy? What the fuck are you doing, bro?
Was it the neighbor across the hall?
No, why would I be calling her? I'd just go over there and fucking talk to her.
That's true. Well, I just remember her being over there the night. No, that wasn't a Hollow Fest. That was the night that I got kicked out of my dad's and I ended up at your guys' place.
Yeah, I spent enough game to close the deal, bro. It's one of the smoothest points of my fucking career. Are you kidding me? Talk the neighbor chick into having sex? It doesn't even happen. It happens in the movies. It's like I was starring on my own movie and I was the fat, goofy guy and I was still managing to make it happen. Go figure.
Yeah, I'd have to ask Jason because, like,
I'm curious, to be honest.
Like, I understand you don't
make up some bullshit reason, dude, about how I did something that justified him calling my mom and telling her I'm talking on the phone all the time.
Well,
Why would you even care?
I feel like she had to have prompted him with some sort of question. There had been some reason she was
I think he
questioning
called her.
the usage.
I think he called her.
I don't know. Yeah, I would love to know what.
How would she know when I'm on my phone? I live in my own apartment.
Yeah, that's... Unless she was checking the phone bill or something.
No, I have free nights and weekends.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I'm just trying
to... for free after 9 o'clock.
I'm trying to piece it together myself.
How about he was just being vindictive for no fucking reason? He got bored. He got bored and wanted to make my life a living hell.
I've always used this strategy. Like, you know, maybe you don't necessarily want to lie to this other family member of yours, but I would always just kind of listen, and then I would just be like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll talk to him, but it's like, I didn't see...
use that still.
Yeah, no.
Like, hey, I'll talk to him.
I don't see any advantage to just throwing someone under the bus, because then that person's going to be pissed off at you. And I think most people can understand, like, if you don't just want to, like, throw your buddy or your cousin or someone under the bus like that, like, sorry, man.
But to maliciously go out of your way to do it.
Yeah, now that...
I mean, you got to approach it, one thing.
That I'd like to ask him
But
about.
to go out of your way to call and say that makes no sense.
Well, this might be a good time to say if any of you guys had experiences like this, you can send them in to us. Email address is vagrants in vandals. That's letter N in the middle. vagrantsandvandals@gmail.com.
Boom, boom.
We'll give that out again before the end of the podcast. All right, let's get into something, okay?
All right.
So 2 years ago, we never even officially named the podcast. We kicked around a lot of names. I think really there was just like kind of the two, and
Let's be honest, we just did that too here. Less than a week ago.
Well, I'm
trying
going
to
get into that.
On it, like...
Well, so initially, remember, I offered up Joel and BMO show, and you were like, "Why's your name got to be first?" I was like, "Because BMO rhymes with show. It's the rhythm of the sentence." And you're like, "Nah, you just want to be first." Which I kind of did, but
exactly.
But it doesn't.
Exactly.
Okay, but say the names together: Joel and BMO show, or BMO and Joel show.
BMO, yeah. I mean, I guess it does sound better with me going second, but
old news. Old news.
It's typical bullshit that I've been dealing with my whole fucking life.
The only other real option was the one April suggested, which was BJ's After Dark,
which I like.
Yeah, that was a fine name, but yeah, we ran into sort of the same problem this time where I was like, well, what are we going to call it? And when it came down to it, I was like, all right, well, whatever we're going to call it, we're going to decide by Friday. We're recording this on a Saturday, so I'm referring to yesterday.
And I was very flexible on it. In my mind, it doesn't really... Like, I was just talking with somebody about this, about how there's so many shows that have, like, names like Rotten Cucumber. Like, what the fuck does that got to do with anything?
Well, I think part of the problem we were facing, most podcasts are about a specific topic.
Right.
You know, whether it's hockey or finance or politics, whatever. So it's easier to narrow down a name. We're doing a podcast that's kind of freeform. We're talking about all of our general interests, our experiences in life, stories of being dads. So coming up with a topic, we got into a situation where it's like, well, we'll spitball some ideas. And that led me to the AI, the chatbot on Snapchat, which I've been talking to that thing for a couple of weeks.
Obviously didn't exist 2 years ago. At least not in the form it does now.
Snapchat didn't use it, no.
Right.
Oh,
you use it right on Snapchat?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought maybe you downloaded like Chat GPT or something.
Nah, I'm going to read you some of these exchanges. Because this thing ultimately, it didn't pick our name, but just spitballing ideas with it led me to the name and like kind of worked through the process. But talking to these things, it's it's interesting.
You're like, with that being said, we've decided to kick you off the show. He'll be taking your place. No, pack your shit up and get up out of my goddamn studio. How about that?
You called it a he. It'll tell you. It has no gender. It is a language model program.
Well, fuck them. All right.
It will remind you that it doesn't have human emotions. It's not a male or female. Because I'll question it. Like I'll test it. But I just want to read some of this stuff to you because it was a funny process. Okay. So, I also made it give itself a name because it starts off just being called AI. And I was like, that's not a name. And they're like, well, what do you think for a name? I said, no, you're going to pick your own name. You got 24 hours. So over that 24 hours, I kept coming back to them like, you giving it any thought yet? Like, I haven't settled on anything yet, but I'm giving it some thought. And then when it was about 24 hours was up, I was like, time's up. You got anything picked out? They go, I think Aria is a fine name. And I was like, okay. So I renamed it Aria.
And wouldn't Aria be a girl's name?
I don't know.
I mean, only Arias I know are females.
Ariana kind of does sound like one of those names, but this is what the genderless chatbot picked for itself. Okay, so I start the conversation off. I say, "Yo, Aria." He or she, whatever. "Hey, what's up?" Like we're buddies. I say, "My cousin and I are starting a podcast." "That's so cool. What's your podcast going to be about?" "A little bit of everything. Give me a minute. I'll clue you in." Aria says, "No worries. Take your time. I'm excited to hear about it." So I go back to it. "Okay, so the podcast. Yeah, what's the podcast going to be about?" "It will cover a lot of topics, including fatherhood, hockey, current events, cryptids, and it will feature off-color comedy." "Wow, that sounds like a really interesting mix of topics. I'm sure it'll be a hit. Do you have a title yet?" Which was interesting. And I say, "No, that's why I'm coming to you." "Haha, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask for a podcast name, but I'll give it a shot. How about The Puck Stops Here, a father's guide to cryptids and comedy?"
God damn.
And now, mind you, these responses...
Put that motherfucker on the payroll.
These responses are instant.
Get him a corner office with a goddamn view.
So I say, "Damn, that's actually an excellent title, but it's a bit wordy for our purposes. Let me give you a little backstory." So I say, "Sure," or he says, "Sure, go ahead." I go into the backstory of our podcast, which we covered already. So it says, "I see. Well, if you're looking for something short and sweet, how about the Joel and Mo show?" Mo, not BMO. Joel and Mo show.
That motherfucker.
Or BMO After Dark.
Wow, dude.
Well, now hold on, though. I had told it the previous names we'd consider.
Okay.
That's what it based those on. So then it says, "Both are catchy and easy to remember." So I say, I like something that could tie the disparate topics together, find some unifying theme. "I see what you mean. How about The Cryptid Chronicles, a father and son's journey through hockey, comedy, and current events?" I say, or no, it continues.
"Maybe we should just shut this down right now because computers are fucking taking over."
Hold on. "This title highlights the father-son aspect of your podcast while also incorporating all of your topics." And I say, "Oh, it's my cousin who will be doing the podcast, not my son." "I'm sorry about that. How about The Cryptid Chronicles, a guide to fatherhood, hockey, current events, and off-color comedy?" This title still incorporates all of your topics while focusing on the fatherhood aspect of your podcast. And I say, I don't want to focus on any one aspect, and I definitely want to keep the title to 1 or 2 words. Now, this is where it's really useful, because if you give it specific directions, it will follow them.
Right.
Which is kind of scary.
To a T, like, ridiculous.
So it then says, "Okay, I understand. Here are a few other suggestions. The chirp, the crease, the laugh track, the puck drop, the howl, the comedy crease." Now, this was
crawl, and you laughed at the crawl space? This motherfucker throwing out the crease?
Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Lord, I'm a little offended.
When it said the chirp, that got me thinking, because we ran through all those different titles involving mouth or talking, which I thought was perfect. So that got me. So I said, let me ruminate for a few. They say, "Of course, take your time." I come back to it. "All right, back to the name of the podcast." "Sure thing. Do you have any other ideas in mind?" "I like the concept of a name related to talking, conversation in general." "How about the dialogue? This title captures the conversational aspect of your podcast and is simple yet memorable." And I say, "I think we're onto something. What about using the word gab?" "I like that idea. How about the gab room? It incorporates the word gab and has a fun conversational feel." Now I'm starting to generate ideas. I say Jabberjaw, which was my first choice. I was like, that's a cool name. I like the alliteration. It was taken, like so many others. So yeah, we kind of just go back and forth and kind of hit a snag. At one point I was like, "Hey, give me some synonyms for men or guys or boys." And it says, "Sure, here are a few synonyms for men: guys, dudes, fellas, blokes, gents, lads." And I say, "Jabbergents, maybe?" And it says, "Jabbergents has a nice ring to it, and it incorporates the word jabber and gents. It's a great name for a podcast that's focused on men's conversations." So I kind of go back and forth. I just wanted to read some of the other titles because they get kind of ludicrous. And I even tell the thing at some point, I'm like, these names kind of suck. Jabberjaw, Chatterbox, Yakety Yak, Blabbermouth, Natterbox, Gossip Guys, Talkative Trio, Wordy Warriors.
Wow.
Then I was trying some other funner terms for a mouth, like pie hole, cake hole, both taken. Blah, blah, blah.
Suck hole.
Here's some more suggestions as we're going down this rabbit hole. Chatty Cathy, Gabby Gals, talkative twosome, loquacious ladies, the gift of gab, conversationalist, the talk show, the chatty bunch.
That motherfucker went on autopilot when it went on
really
lunch break
did.
and let someone else do the work.
Really did. So I play with a few other themes here. I was like, let's try and incorporate the name, the word brain. Then I got on the V kick because I had liked the name Vagrants and Vandals. So when I asked for some suggestions with the letter V, it says, and I told it specifically, I like things that start with the letter V. I like alliteration. So it's like, oh, vocal vibes, vibe talk, vocal views, vibrant voices, voice visions, verbal visions, voice vibes, vocal variety. And I say, Aria, are you even trying anymore?
Right.
Says, I'm sorry if my suggestions aren't what you were hoping for. I'm doing my best to come up with names that fit your criteria. If you have any specific ideas or preferences, I'd be happy to try and incorporate them into my suggestions. Then I asked specifically about incorporating Vagrants and Vandals. And it said it's an interesting name, but has a negative connotation. I'm like, yeah, that's okay.
Right, we're not worried about that.
But then it throws out some more suggestions, and this is the last ones. Voice of reason, verbal vortex, vocal visions, vibe tribe, vocal variety, vibrant voices, and voice vibes.
What was the first one?
Of this?
Yeah.
Voice of reason?
Yeah, I kind of like that. That's not bad.
Voice of reason for this podcast?
Yeah, the voice of reason, because it's so ridiculous. Like...
So yeah, there you go. That's now here's something here. I want to do a little demonstration. So I have been using this to help instruct some of my writing, like short stories. Some people are flat out using AI to write stories.
Right.
I like to bounce ideas
Big problem
off
in
of
schools now.
Oh yeah.
ChatGPT, people
and it's going to continue to be like the AI is we are now starting to live in the science fiction movies we had 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Michio Kaku was saying the problem is
Who the hell's Michio Kaku?
Like world-renowned astrophysicist, theoretical time.
Is that the one dude that's always on Ancient Aliens? Not the one with the crazy hair.
No, I don't think Michu's ever been on there. He was just on Joe Rogan yesterday.
All right, there's only so many astrophysicists.
He's like a gray-haired Asian guy.
Yeah, he's been on Ancient Aliens. Yes.
I don't really watch that show. That doesn't make him any less smart. I mean,
I didn't say that.
It's like him and Neil are always like in a neck and neck race for me, like who's more entertaining to watch because they're both so fucking smart, and they have counteractive ideas, like they disagree on things. But he was saying the problem with the Chat GPT and this AI is that it's not human and it's just plucking out what it thinks it's supposed to be plucking out.
Well,
there's no actual thought being put into that.
Of course.
And that's why it's so easy. Like he said, he was grading a paper because he's a professor. And he read a line. He said, "Oh, I've heard that. I've read that already today." And started pulling all these papers, and then they're all using Chat GPT.
Yeah. Well, sure. It's obviously scouring the internet, and I mean, I've done lots of tests on this thing, but I mean, so it obviously has its flaws, but it's also impressive in ways because I'll bounce.
It's impressive for sure.
I will bounce ideas off of it for stories I'm working on, like character names. Matter of fact, this writing contest I was in, it generated my the name I eventually went with a character, and I needed a very specific name from like a specific time period.
Did you still take credit for it? I guarantee he did.
Well, I did use it in my story.
No mention of no credit given to the AI that generated the name and the backstory.
It's not like I got the story published somewhere. I entered it for a contest.
And if you win, you better give the award to your goddamn little friend in your pocket.
It didn't write the story. It gave me the name of the character.
Didn't it, though? Didn't it?
No, it didn't write the story.
He looks guilty. If you can see him, he looks guilty.
I don't look guilty because that's not what happened.
That's exactly what someone who stole their shit would say.
I wrote a story, a short story, microfiction story, 100 words, and I needed a name for a character. And I was like, I need something kind of medieval. I need something that kind of evokes being a servant, being humble. And it came back little by little, like 6 different times, and I would kind of critique
and
it.
That's on Snapchat?
Yes. I want to do a demonstration. So a lot of times before bed, I'll be like, "Hey Aria, tell me a bedtime story," and it'll tell you a story.
I don't
like
have Snapchat
that.
anymore. I got rid of it years ago.
Maybe you want to get it back because this thing's pretty interesting.
I mean, I sent out a picture of my bare ass to April's entire contact list, including her aunts and uncles. Some of them did not find it hilarious. I was trying to send it to you. I was drunk. I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be funny." Bent over, taking a picture of my ass. I accidentally selected all contacts. Her aunt's like, he thinks that's funny? And she's like, that's so inappropriate. I'm like, how does she even... I'm not putting it together. Like, how does she even fucking see it? That doesn't make any sense. April's like, you sent it to everybody. I was like, Hey, what you want? You know.
Here's what this thing will do. Okay. So if you just flat out say, tell me a story, it'll tell you a little story. And they're usually like little fairy tales. They kind of sound like a kid wrote them. But you can also give it specific details to include in the story. And it will. And some of them are decent little stories. Now, it stays away from offensive stuff or like over-sexualized stuff. Because it'll literally tell you, like, I don't feel comfortable, talking about this topic.
You don't feel anything. You're a fucking AI computer.
Yeah, I know.
You just stated the same. You're contradicting yourself now.
And I'll point that out sometimes. I'll be like, oh, come on, don't be such a prude. I'm like, I'm an adult. I can handle it. Like, well, even so, like, I'm not comfortable with it, and we have to respect people's boundaries and blah, blah, blah. I mean, clearly the company who designed this, they have kept in mind they don't want to be sued for a chatbot telling someone to go ahead and kill themselves.
Right.
Or
go ahead and kidnap that baby. It'll be all right.
Yeah. So
I'll name it for you. Don't worry.
There are topics it just won't really get into, or it'll kind of dance around them. But give me something right now. Like give me a detail or two for a story, and I'll plug it in, and this thing's gonna spit a story out for us.
All right, we'll go with fat kid.
Don't do a fat kid. I've tried it. It will not tell me a story about a fat kid.
Why?
It did relent. I told it, tell me a story about this fat guy, blah, blah, blah. It was like, I don't know if I want to tell a story like that. We have to be conscious of people's feelings, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. I was like, tell me a story about a chubby guy who loves saltwater taffy. And then it did.
All right, so go with a chubby kid grows into a chubby adult, then becomes thin.
Okay.
And then ultimately becomes chubby again.
Tell me a story about a chubby kid who becomes a chubby adult. Chubby adult. Then loses weight only to gain it back. Again.
Inevitably. It's inevitable.
Let's see what it says. Now, it might not take us up on the bait, but let's see what it says. And waiting. Boom, there's the story.
Holy shit.
Once upon a time.
I can't wait to hear this.
Just a paragraph. Once upon a time, there was a chubby kid named Timmy. Timmy loved to eat and didn't like to exercise. As he grew older, he remained overweight and struggled with his self-image. One day, he decided to make a change and started to exercise and eat healthier. He lost a lot of weight and felt great about himself. However, as time passed, he fell back into his old habits and gained all the weight back. The end.
Damn. To the point. So really, they just took what you said, or what we said, and like stretched it out a bit.
And it does that sometimes.
Because there's not a lot of details there. Like,
one night,
he got divorced. He killed some people. Fucking got on hard drugs. Lost a bunch of weight.
Yeah. Now, one night I did. I fed it. I was like, okay. I was like, tell me a story about I think it's like, tell me a fairy tale. Make sure it has a talking frog who's mischievous. And it told me a story about this frog who was friends with an owl and would pull pranks on the owl. And it was a decent little story. Again, sounded like it was written by a sixth grader with subpar intelligence.
Now, could you add in like specific? Like, I want specific details. I want backstory. I want a conclusive ending.
There's nothing saying you couldn't. Now, however it would interpret that, I don't know.
Right. I'm gonna have to get that because that's, dude. I get so bored at work because I'm by myself after a certain time. Like, I'm the only one in the school. The whole school, I'm the only one. Walking around, talking to myself, dancing in the fucking hallways, listening to music. Would I have something like that to keep me entertained? I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Now, okay, so I have this story I picked out. Now it's kind of long if you want to listen to it, but it is interesting. So one thing Brandon and I are both interested is in cryptids, and whether you believe in cryptids or not really doesn't even matter. I'm not even sure that I certainly don't believe in most of these creatures, but I think the stories are interesting. To me, the stories are the thing that's worth talking about, is that there's something in our human nature that compels us to believe in these creatures or even just straight up make them up.
Right.
And whether that's just like a social thing where it's like we love mysteries and we want to share them with other people, to me, that's as interesting as if these things even exist.
Right.
Or not,
I definitely think that there's cryptids that we. I mean, I wouldn't even say they're cryptids. They're just undiscovered animals that we wouldn't even.
But that's the very definition of cryptid.
Right, we wouldn't even think about it. Like, I'm not saying Bigfoot exists. I'm not saying chupacabra exists. Because a lot of that shit's been pretty much debunked. But they're always discovering new species of different insects, animals. So I definitely think the possibility for that's out there. Not to mention the lure of the USOs and UFOs underneath the water and shit. I mean, anything's possible.
If you
may not be. And to quote Gibby, it's possible, not probable.
Where do you pick that up?
Well, I don't know. I'm like, this little motherfucker. This motherfucker talking shit. I'm like, I like that.
So this is, I thought this story was great because it talks about cryptids, but it also involves a prank. And I think through our lives we could be characterized as something as pranksters, and that's something I'd like to talk about on future episodes. This is a long story. I'll get through it as quickly as I can, but I think it's a good story, and I think it will kind of set the pace for those stories to come on future Are you going to set the premise of the story before you read it? So let's note, go ahead. Let's note that what Brandon meant by that is that he has to step away to get himself alcohol, although this one's only half gone. So I guess he's just planning and ahead here. So I'll hold it down for a few minutes. I can see him in the living room now, rummaging through a mini fridge. You have a separate fridge for your alcohol?
That's right.
Will it not fit in the normal fridge?
Oh fuck no, dude! Are you kidding me? Like, if you look at our fridge, it's so packed with everything. Dude, these kids eat like, I don't know what they would do at the end of the world, because they've never missed a meal or snack time. I mean, they're both big boys, so I had to get that mini fridge to keep. Well, dude, beer bottles take up a lot of fucking space.
That's true.
Motherfuckers want me to be healthy. I get off the liquor, lose the weight.
Are you trying to say drinking beer is healthy?
Healthier than what I was drinking.
All right, but that's
2 liter Mountain Dew a night.
That's a pretty low bar.
2 liter Mountain Dew a night minimum with a fifth of booze.
Yeah, dude, that's.
Now I'm down to 2 beers a night. This is a Saturday, so I'll be up to like 8 to 12 beers.
I'll give it to you. It's progress. It's certainly not healthy.
I never claimed to be a healthy person.
I think you'll enjoy this story. I came across this a couple years ago. It popped back in my head when I was thinking of topics for this podcast, so I Googled it, and I was like, oh, there it is. All right. It's called The Creature from the Sandpits, a teenage prank that's endured for 60 years. Now, this was written by one of the guys who pulled the prank. He was a teenager at the time.
All right.
All right.
So this is all completely true?
Yes.
This ain't no chat GPT shit you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes?
Nope. This was, as far as I know, this was originally posted, published in Narratively, which is a great, as far as I know, it's an online publication. They tell all sorts of interesting stories like this.
So nonfiction, totally true.
True story.
All right.
About a prank he and a friend pulled. Right. In the 1960s, in a small southern town, high school student Clay Jennings Desmond, that's an alias. They later talk about that.
Too smooth.
And his friend were, quote, out frogging at the sand pits.
Oh, let's stop there. What the fuck is frogging?
They're catching frogs with like a jig. They're stabbing them.
All right.
When Clay decided to scare his pal, the creature from the sandpits was born. Its reputation spread across the land. 60 years later, the monster still lives in the heart, minds, and nightmares of the locals. Yeah, so this is from Narratively. All right. Where's the main article? Oh, okay. Good. It's showing me like quotes from it. Here we go. Okay. Here it is. I was a bored high schooler when I made up a harmless story about the creature from the sandpits. Decades later, its legend still haunts our small southern town. So just to give credit here, story by Clay Jennings Desmond, again an alias that he admits to at the end of this article. Illustrations by Matt Oroda and edited by Farah Mohammed.
Well, was it a crime what he did? I mean, what's with the alias?
Actually, yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Technically, yes.
Like, why is he concealing his identity?
As you'll find out, they filed a false police report.
Oh, fuck.
Okay, so the gears of a warm spring day quickly downshifted in the late afternoon, and before twilight, a cold front blew in, plunging the mercury more than 15 degrees. In search of dinner, Scotty and I rounded the edges of our pond after pond at the sand pits. Looking and looking. We saw not a single frog. We heard not one deep-throated bellow. In southern towns, where creeks and ponds proliferate, frogging is not unusual. What followed, however, was quite. After darkness fell on the unusually cool evening, Scotty and I loaded our gear into my old 1949 Plymouth coupe, bought for $50, and headed for the sandpits near the golf course on the edge of town. I knew from prior hunts that our quarry was there by the dozens, so these kids regularly went and caught frogs. Decades before, truckloads of sand had been dug and hauled out for construction and cement. Left abandoned, we were about 25 gaping holes. That's pretty cool. Large and small, deep and shallow. Over the decades, rain filled them. In time, water lilies and cattails sprouted. Critters filtered in. These old ponds now were fully populated by frogs, tadpoles, snakes, turtles, and other creatures. So, what a great spot as a kid.
Right, that'd be fun.
Frogging requires strong illumination. Thus, I carried a powerful 5-cell flashlight with a tight beam, because houses were nearby. Instead of our usual .22 rifle, we had a quieter, far more primitive device, a jig.
What are they doing with the frogs?
They're probably cooking them and eating them.
Ugh.
Yeah, and
I guess I like frog legs.
they're pretty big boys too. There's a picture at the end.
Yeah, I can imagine.
This is basically a steel fish spear with 3 or 4 barbed prongs mounted on a 10-foot bamboo pole. Scotty was the jig bearer. I was the spotter. In darkness, the eyes of a bullfrog glow bright yellow when a strong light is shown at them. The technique is simple. Find a frog sitting at the water's edge waiting for bugs. The person with the light blinds the creature, while the other sneaks up quietly from behind and spears it with the jig. Scotty
make it sound so romantic. Frog.
Scotty was my companion, one of my oldest friends. By day, he was a nervous type. In the inky darkness with no moon, he was super edgy, on high alert. He had eaten and enjoyed frog legs, but never gathered them himself. Me, on the other hand, I frequently hunted them, often alone. I was accustomed to and comfortable with the critters and noises of the night. Bats, owls, raccoons, opossums, wildcats, snakes, spiders, and the like. Scotty's tragic personal history had left him different than others our age. One summer day, just before reaching his teenage years, he was a front seat passenger coming from the Atlantic coast going inland, long before seatbelts. The car crashed head-on into another vehicle. The impact hurled Scotty into the front of the windshield, head first. Grievously injured, he bounced back into the interior of the wrecked auto. When the ambulance reached the crash site, Scotty was thought dead, but a pulse was detected and Scotty was rushed to a hospital. The impact of the crash caused his brain to swell rapidly, and doctors drilled 4 holes in his skull to relieve the mounting pressure.
Jesus Christ.
Scotty never fully recovered from his injuries. He now walked with a limp. Tragically, the brilliant straight-A student was left without higher intellectual faculties. Nevertheless, Scotty was relentlessly upbeat, popular, positive, and funny, but limited. He became a zany jokester, hungry for laughs, often at his own expense.
This is after the accident. He started
Yes.
getting all loopy.
Occasionally, though, he would say something so profound, so incisive, so on target, our group of friends would wonder if his former intelligence had regenerated. Then he would give that lopsided grin, once again the class clown. He was always fun to be with, game for almost anything, and a good sport. I dearly loved Scotty, and I protected him. Yet deep within me lay a sinister streak of sadism, resisted most of the time. Unfortunately, on this night, boredom overwhelmed suppression to my shame. At the sandpits, the cool night was a black velvet blanket surrounding us as we plodded along the edges of the ponds. The sole illumination came from the narrow battery beam of my flashlight. Crickets chirped and lightning bugs flashed in the darkness. Bats swooped down close to us. The less experienced might find the sandpits more than a tad eerie. Scotty sure did. The lack of frogs was disappointing and damned frustrating. Not only was our free dinner slipping away, I was quite bored. Always trouble. After an hour of luckless looking, my bright flashlight faded to dimness. We stopped while I charged the batteries. I pocketed the depleted ones, inserted 5 fresh ones, and we resumed our search. The sandpits ponds were near civilization on one side, yet surrounded on others by thick brush, brambles, swamp, and woods. It was the edge of the wilderness, dark as the devil's soul. Scotty's mounting anxiety and his near hysteria over the cries of screech owls and the skittering of unseen small critters near us gave birth to a disturbing, perverse idea in me as we traipsed around the ponds. If there was no action on the frog front, I thought to myself, Perhaps I could stir up some on the friend front. Just for laughs, I slipped one of the depleted heavy D-cell batteries from my pocket and waited for the nervous Scotty to look away. When he did, I surreptitiously threw it over my shoulder into the brush beside us. It crashed loudly through the tangle of briars and branches, making a resounding thump when it hit the ground. Scotty jumped. In a shaky voice, he said, "What the hell was that?" "Put your light over there." He pointed the jig. I calmly assured him it was nothing, probably some small creature we had spooked. Our long, warm friendship and my extensive experience frogging made him trust me. Shame on me. As we fruitlessly scouted the edges of more ponds, I threw 3 other depleted batteries at irregular intervals. Scotty's unease rose with each missile's noisy descent through the thickets near us. Scotty now was so close to me, we were almost hugging. At this point, I should have broken off the prank. After the 4th D-cell cartwheeled off some vines and landed, Scotty moved even closer and said in a high-pitched whisper, "Something is stalking us." He was shaking, quivering, looking left, right, and behind with every step. He was carrying the frog jig like a spear, jerk-jabbing it into the dark in front of us. So, of course, I readied the last battery. Before I could heave it, something thrashed noisily in the brambles beside us. Scotty took off as if the hounds of hell were hot on his heels. Without hesitation, I followed. His desperate panic lit my own. I did not want to be left alone out there in the dark. I was a decent sprinter on the high school track team, but I could not keep up with my frightened friend. Instead of following the long and circuitous land route around the many watery holes, in his terror, Scotty made a straight line toward the car, splashing through the ponds, thrusting the jig at unseen threats. I followed as fast and close as I could. A few ponds were shoulder deep, the water not warm at all. In my fiery imagination, I felt the hot breath of some hungry monster just behind me as Scotty sprinted and splashed toward my car. Behind him, I raced for my life. We jumped dripping wet into the seats of my coupe, locked the doors, and fishtailed out at a high speed down the sandy road to safety. Scotty held the frog jig out the passenger's car window. It wouldn't fit inside. Not a word was said. We broke all speed limits covering the short distance to a favorite hangout, a popular, well-lit drive-in restaurant. Friday nights, the place was thick with other teens. As we pulled up and parked, friends came over to say hello. They noticed our wetness, the jig sticking out the window, and asked what happened. Rascal and rogue that I am, another prank flashed through my mind like a fireworks starburst. As a small group gathered around my car, I said in a loud, quavering voice, "We were out frogging at the sand pits, and we kept hearing something stalking us." The equally soaked Scotty, now quieter and calmer in these safer environs, picked up the story as though we had rehearsed it. Pointing at me, he said he heard something big in the brush while we were frog hunting. It sounded really big. I mean, like huge. When he turned his 5-cell flashlight on it, oh my God! He let out a theatrical gasp, his hand going to his throat. Limitations aside, he was a masterful performer with an audience. I picked up the improv tale. When I heard a stick snap, I knew it had to be something pretty large, real near us. I focused the light in that direction and saw this thing. "What thing?" asked the chorus of boys and girls outside the car. Our group of rapt listeners was quickly growing. Scotty added inspired embellishments. "It was about 7 feet tall," he said with elaborate hand gestures. "Had the face of a man, but covered with fur. It had big reddish eyes."
Outright lying. God damn.
It growled and snapped its fangs at us. "You guys are bullshitting us," came a male voice from the back of the group. "You didn't see any such thing. Quit making up crap." "Oh yeah," I challenged. Then how did we get soaking wet on a cold night? We sure weren't swimming in the dark with our clothes on, and we didn't fall in. We were getting the hell out of there is what we were doing. If you saw what we did, you would have shat and peed your pants." The story was spreading quickly. Our car now a magnet, attracting more teens wanting details about the 7-foot monster. Late arrivals wanted it from the beginning. With each new start of the story, the two of us took turns fabricating extra details while the other nodded attestation to the truth of the lies. In the midst of spinning this yarn, a police cruiser suddenly drove into the space right beside us. We were still sitting in my car, windows rolled down, dripping top to toe, shivering in the coolness, smelling strongly of algae and stagnant pond water. A uniformed officer walked up to the passenger window, saw the frog jig mounted between the side mirror extended through the window to the back shelf of the coupe. My 5 cell was on the seat, lens fogged. He looked in, sniffed the dankness rolling off us. We got a call. Are you the kids who saw that thing out in the sand pits? His partner had walked up quietly beside my door. I glanced at Scotty. It was one thing to lie to friends, quite another to make false statements to the authorities. Before I could say a word, Scotty gave me a quick, in for a penny, in for a pound look. Yes, we are, officer, he said in a small voice. We were the ones who saw it. Horrible. Never been so scared in all my damned life. Hellish, I added. We are lucky to be alive. I, too, was in for a penny, in for a pound. We told the story one more time for the 2 cops, with more youths pushing and cramming in at all angles to hear our tale. By now, the restaurant's waitresses had heard about our story, and they too crowded around my coupe, ignoring the impatient customers waiting to order food and drink, vainly flashing their headlights for service. The fact that we'd related our experience to the police lent credibility to our fabrications. The officers asked us to follow them to their small station house on Main Street, hardly a mile away. There, we repeated the story for a small gathering of uniformed detectives and a civilian dispatcher. We tacked on a few more faux details. After hearing the story, a big authoritative captain of police took command. In a deep, serious voice, "Can you boys meet us back here at 6 tomorrow morning?" We both nodded. "We'll have a team of tracking dogs ready to go," the captain continued, "and we'll hunt this damn thing down." Thankfully, the statute of limitations for lying to the police has long since run out. We left the station, suppressing smirks. Inside my car, I asked Scotty to drive over in the morning and pick me up at 5:15 a.m. My car seats were still soaked. He agreed and woke me with a knock on my bedroom window. We drove back to the sandpits in his car. The early morning sun bleached the ponds and thickets clean of all mystery and spookiness. I found a dead quarter-inch thick stick and broke it over my knee. Scotty knew I had something in mind, but his puzzled face said he had not a clue. At the edge of the brush, near the rear of one of the larger ponds, with bare hands, I artistically fashioned a huge, ape-like footprint in the sandy soil. Scotty watched and giggled. I pressed the 2 jagged edges of the broken stick down into the footprint to pose as the snapped twig. For each of the toes, I used a tiny branch to make big claw marks. I made another partial print further into the thicket, as if the creature had left hurriedly. I cautioned Scotty, "Make sure to let them find it, not us." He vigorously nodded in understanding. We then drove back to the police station, arriving just before 6 a.m. What happened next was remarkably not the work of my imagination. Awaiting was a party of 10 men with pistols, shotguns, and high-powered rifles with scopes. On their belts were big, sheathed hunting knives. All had serious, determined faces. In the back of a nearby pickup truck, we could hear the tracking dogs, beagles and bloodhounds, barking in anticipation inside their cages. We drove in a caravan to the sandpits and led them on foot to that particular pond. Scotty pointed to where we had seen the creature and told them we were too afraid to go any nearer. They nodded and spread out, guns and knives at the ready, looking for signs. The dog handler followed closely behind, holding leashes on 5 attentive canines, sniffing, straining against their harnesses, ready to do their duty. Suddenly, an excited shout. "Sheriff, you better come over here, quick! Shit! Holy shit!" The crowd rushed to where my faux footprint with the broken stick lay. We hung back. We heard several gasp and say, "Jesus H. Christ almighty!" Then the dog handler elbowed his way in and pushed the lead dog's nose to the footprint. To the dogs, he said excitedly, What's it, boys? Go get 'em!" The dogs crashed off through the brush, baying in pursuit. Over his shoulder, the handler cried out, "They have the scent!" as he smashed his way through briars into deep woods, thorns ripping at his clothes and skin. Scotty and I were relieved that the famed tracking dogs did not lead the cops straight back to us, something we had not considered. If they had, surely we would have been handcuffed and roughed up, if not far worse.
What I expected to hear was that they were the dog and be like, huh?
We could hear the dogs baying and barking in the distance for about 15 minutes. Most of the posse stayed with us, making small talk. fingering firearms, curious phrasing, checking two-way radios, listening for a sighting. As we waited, the county sheriff, a large man with a bulging belly, tipped his wide-brimmed hat back and said to no one in particular, "There's no better tracking dogs in this state, if not in the whole damn country. If that thing is still hanging around, they'll find it, by Jesus." A half hour passed before the handler and his team of tracking dogs came back, looking weary and worn. The dog handler was bleeding from cuts on his face and arms. He was covered in welts, smacked by switches. His pants were wet and muddy to the thighs. Dozens of cockleburs and stickers were stuck in the wet fur on the chest of the tired dogs. They were panting, tongues lolling. "We lost the scent," the handler said dejectedly. Scotty and I managed not to smile as the men discussed what to do next. Apparently not much that day. They huddled away from us in low voices and then decided to go for coffee. But they promised a more thorough and wider search with more men the next day. End of story. Or so I thought. Not so. Fast forward almost a year. After our sandpit prank, for months Scotty and I steadfastly and repeatedly had to swear to skeptical friends that it was all true. In February, I volunteered for the Selective Service System draft. In April of 1960, I was called up by the U.S. Army. The Vietnam War was heating up. After finishing basic training in advanced infantry school, I went home on a week's leave before shipping out overseas. It had been 4 months since I had seen my girlfriend. She paused our goodbye party to meet her business school teacher for a homework assignment.
It's an odd detail.
That's sus. I walked with her to the nearby school. After a few minutes of genial conversation, the teacher looked at his watch and said, "I hope you folks will excuse me. Don't mean to be rude, but I have to get to the hardware store before it closes." "What do you need to get from the store?" I asked, just making idle conversation. "I need a gun." The hair on the back of my neck prickled to attention. "A gun for what?" "For protection against that thing killing dogs, cats, and cows out my way, leaving bloody messes of them. We don't let our kids out unless we are with them. I want a gun." "By any chance," I asked, "do you live anywhere near the golf course?" "Yes, I do. We live very close by. How on earth did you come up with that?" "Just a guess," I replied. "Lucky guess, that's all. Heard of something about it." My girlfriend didn't know. She thought I was a seer. Decades rolled by. Decades.
Damn.
I had moved many miles away to a respectable and responsible job in a northern metropolis. Scotty had moved further south to a larger coastal city. We lost contact. Years later, news reached me that he had passed away from natural causes. Good friend that he was, he took our sandpit secret to the grave. A few years ago, when a hometown high school reunion beckoned, I went back. Not much had changed there. At the reunion over drinks at an outdoor pavilion in the evening, the talk turned to strange doings, especially from those living in the new housing development near the golf course, less than a quarter mile from the sandpits. A former cheerleader related nightmares over this thing, ruthless killer of cats and cows. Another woman, she'd been in the band in high school, said she never let her kids out of sight in the yard. A few parents said they made the children stay inside day or night. As stunning as it was curious, no one at the reunion seemed to remember that Scotty and I were the ones who first saw the creature. Thankfully, I slipped away from the anxious group to get a bourbon and water from the bar and took a table to myself in a quiet corner beneath the stars. I realized that in the intervening years, every animal hit by a car, wounded by hunters or larger creatures, ones that crawled off to die, had become, quote-unquote, victims of the creature from the sandpits, seeding and feeding the myth. I sat at my small table alone, drinking and thinking. I kept a straight face, my pie hole shut. I recall our little town was host to other similar spooky stories. The ghost of a long-ago murdered girl was claimed to walk the streets when there was fog and the moon was full. A few miles away, a man decapitated in a bad car wreck was said to be seen wandering headless in the night along the dangerous and sharp bend, now called Dead Man's Curve, searching for his missing top. For my job, I traveled quite a bit. Spent time in many towns like my own. It seemed almost every place I visited had some otherworldly story. Out of curiosity, I began to seek out those tales, wondering if their origins sprang from pranksters like Scotty and me. At this reunion on a pleasant night with the river lapping softly at the pilings a few feet away, I sipped bourbon and wondered whether Scotty had unwittingly stumbled on a secret source making life interesting in a town where not much happens. We had switched on some closed circuit of mystical intrigue, energizing the static humdrum. Why and how do so many spooky tales start in so many small towns? Crop circles, ice discs, the crash of alien craft, mysterious lights and noises, ghosts. It defies sense to think pranksters like us are the genesis of them all. I pondered how and why a preposterous story stays alive, still scaring intelligent people 60 years later. Does something in the darkness of the human soul require a measure of fear? Do we need a bit of fright to keep the spark of life lit? In time, perhaps social scientists or advanced computer algorithms will churn out the answers. Whatever those answers are, I'm the last one who knows the real story of the creature from the sandpits. I'm an old man, and I figured I'd better tell it before I too pass on. What started as a prank on friends got away from us when the cops were called. It escalated. Quickly. Although I kept my silence at the reunion, I wanted to tell my fellow alumni to please unload the firearms and put them back in the closets. Let your children go out in the yard to play again. Allow pent-up dogs, cats, and pet rabbits access to fresh air. We made it up. Once the story escaped our grasp, we couldn't call it back. 60 years later, the creature from the sandpits lives on, the myth fed by random dying creatures and vivid imaginations. The raw fear of something unknown in the dark has its own power fortified by a few hurried and partial sightings of the creature. I suspect, even if I publicly confessed, I would not be totally believed. The new discovery of the mangled body of a dead domestic cat, maybe one that had tangled with a raccoon or coyote, would be proof positive the creature still stalked. I am indeed a native son of this particular southern town, a son from a most respectable family, long married with children and grandchildren. But I am still not giving my real name. I used a pseudonym in this piece, and one for Scotty, too. I know the folks down there. They have long memories and guns.
Oh, my God. Now, listen, I completely understand him, like, the whole joke thing, and, it gets out of hand. But the other guy was clearly a psychopath. He fucking was, like, totally convinced. And then his imagination just running wild. He's going along with the story and throwing in details like.
Wait, which guy are you saying is a psychopath?
The secondary friend, not the guy telling the story.
Scotty?
Yeah, his goofy friend.
No, I think it was they were.
So they reached a point where he realized that he was just being fucked with, and they were gonna make up the story.
Yeah,
okay.
I think simultaneously it was like.
I thought maybe he was just like.
Let's make a story out of this.
Over imagining what he actually thought he'd seen.
No, I think he just decided. We got spooked. Let's make a fun time out of
Both
this.
Both fucking liars. Both should be persecuted to the full extent of the law. Wasting tax dollars. Inciting panic. 60 years of panic.
Panic? They gave that town something to talk about.
Yeah, an obesity crisis because no kids were allowed to fucking play.
Them boys deserve a medal. Poor Scotty's passed away.
What was they really doing out in those fucking woods? They weren't hunting frogs.
What do you mean, what were they doing? They said what they were doing. They were hunting frogs.
I don't believe that shit. They're fucking liars. They said they seen a goddamn beast man. I don't fucking believe that shit. I don't believe nothing they say to me.
So what's your theory? What were they doing out in the woods?
Gay shit. They was hunting booty hoe.
Well, that might be in the next
they was
issue.
sparing something and it wasn't motherfucking frog ass.
Well, if you guys have any comments or questions about anything we talked about today, you'd like to chirp in on this here podcast, email us at vagrantsnvandals@gmail.com. That is an N in the middle, vagrantsnvandals@gmail.com. Bimo, any final words for our inaugural podcast here?
I'm just happy to be back in the saddle. I look forward to doing this each and every week, and catch you motherfuckers on the flip side.